The latest project that I just completed was this Texas Tech cane. It's got a little double T logo on the handle. It's a gift for my best friend's dad. Made out of cherry and walnut. Got some wood burning on the handle, some rounded out over on the handle as well, and then some detail throughout the shaft. So hope you guys follow along, enjoy the process, and take a look. If you like it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you guys for watching. Since I had to laminate some boards together, I figured I'd go ahead and start with that since the glue needs some time to dry. I started by cutting the walnut and cherry down to about 1.5 inches wide. That way it would be a somewhat manageable dimension for the cane as I turned it. Then I had to rip down the walnut to about 1/4 inch thick so that way it looked nice in between. As you can see, I've got some gnarly bow in that walnut. That was about the third time or so that it had been resawn, so I figured I could counteract that with the bow and the cherry. With a liberal amount of glue, it was time for the glue up. You'll see in a second that I put some green painter's tape on the ends in the middle, so that way I can clamp vertically so that way I don't have any vertical movement in the boards as it dries. Easier to send through the table saw that way. The 6x6 by 2 inch chunk of cherry that I got wasn't quite square, so I had to square it up just a little bit so that way it would be easier for the burning that I did here in just a little bit. A 2 inch thick handle is a little bit wide, so I wanted to rip it down to about 1.5 inches, that way it's easier to hold. The end goal is to have a dowel running through the handle and a little bit of the shaft to connect the pieces. So I'm drilling a 1/2 inch hole all the way through that chunk of cherry. The reason I had to put some support boards on the bottom is because that rest plate on my drill press didn't go down quite low enough to accept the 1/2 inch drill bit and the 6 inches of cherry. Now it's time to get ready to burn the double T on the handle. This is a little bit lengthy process, so I'll describe what's going on in fast motion here. I had to print out the double T flipped horizontally, so mirror image, onto some cardstock so it's sturdy. Then I had to paper clip some trace paper around it and then trace out all the lines, fill in where I wanted to burn in all the way, and I guess fill in the lines whenever I burn in a second. So a lot of detail here is very, very key. So that way when we get to take the trace paper off, we set it up nice and neat. I had to tape it around because it was a small piece of wood. Then I just take a socket. I think I took like maybe 18mm socket, something big and round that's not too scuffed up. That way it's easy to rub on. Because the burning takes quite a while, this video, or this part of the video, is sped up 50 times. It takes a long, long time in a steady hand, so that's why I had to speed it up, so that way you're not bored with it. But the idea is really, really cool, and it comes together really, really nice as you finish up. I've got a burning iron that has different temperature settings. I initially wasn't planning on doing this fill-in right here, but after doing some test burns on that discard area in the bottom corner of the piece of wood, I decided I'd go ahead and fill it in at a lighter shade, and it actually turned out pretty nice, so I'm pleased with that. In order to not have to do as much cutting with the scroll saw, I decided to go ahead and do some rough dimensioning on this square, so that way it would be a little bit easier on the scroll saw, wouldn't have to make so many cuts and take as long with that. The shaft blank dried pretty well, came out nice, so now it's time to clean it up, get it prepared for turning. Uh, since the stack of boards was almost 2 inches, I wanted to cut off some sides so that way I could make it as square as possible. Now I'm trying to make it, I guess, an octagon shape, so that way it's a little bit easier on the lathe when I start turning. The whole turning process was really lengthy, so I cut out a bunch of clips on the videos, and I also sped some of these up anywhere from 8 to 50 times. So you're going to see me bust through this pretty quick on the video. One thought about turning anything on a lathe is the more detail that you add, the much longer it's going to take, especially in the turning process, the changing of tools, and then also the sanding at the very, very end. So keep that in mind when you have any projects that require a lot of detail. Make sure to allow a lot of time. This sanding is only a 12-second clip, but I did the same exact process starting with 150 and going to 220, 320, and all the way up to 400 grit sandpaper. The initial hole I drilled on this end to set it up in the lathe was only about 3/16 of an inch, so I had to work my way up drill bits all the way up to 1/2 inch to accept the dowel that's going to connect the two pieces. I wasn't quite pleased with the way the handle turned out. It was really hard to hold and tough on the hand, so I decided to add a 1/2 inch thick piece of walnut on the top. That way I could round it out, make it a little bit easier on the hand. With this sanding process, I started with 150 grit sandpaper to round out some of those edges that the belt sander put in. Then I worked all the way up to 220, then 320, then all the way up to 400, but I'm only showing you the 150 right now. Please take a moment to appreciate my creativity in setting up these pieces so that way I could finish them. I used 2 coats of satin polyurethane to brighten it up a little bit, give it some nice shine. With the sanding in between the 2 coats of polyurethane, I finished it up with a sanding of 2000 grit sandpaper, sanded between all the cracks and crevices, and it turned out pretty nice. This is definitely one of the most unique gifts I've made, and I really enjoyed the process of putting all the pieces together. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and then also make your way over to Facebook and like RRR Woodworks. That's Triple R Woodworks. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I appreciate your feedback.